Welcome to Permission to Kick Ass, the show that gives you a virtual seat at the bar for the real conversations that happen between entrepreneurs. I'm interviewing all kinds of business owners, from those just a few years into freelancing to CEOs helming 9-figure companies. If you've ever worried that everyone else just seems to get it and you're missing something or messing things up, this show is for you. I'm your host, Angie Coley, and let's get to it. Hey, and welcome back to Permission to Kick Ass. With me today is my new friend, Dr. Demartini. Say hi.
Hi, everyone.
Tell us a little bit about your business and what you do, Dr. Demartini.
Well, I'm in the business of education, really. I'm an educator, a teacher, researcher, writer, do film, and I do some consulting. I've been teaching for over 50 years now. Wow,
that's incredible. I mean, wow. That's a very long title, too. Educator, teacher, trainer, speaker, writer. I love that. What started you off on this path?
I was 17 years old, and I was a high school dropout. I was living in a tent, and I was led to a yoga class. This is in 1972. And at that class, an amazing speaker was presenting. And that night, after his presentation, it catalyzed in me an idea that maybe I could overcome my learning problems and speaking problems, because I had a speech impediment and I had not read a book yet. So I wasn't 18 before I read. And that night, I had an epiphany and saw a dream and a vision that maybe I can bring it up and show you a picture of it, actually.
Heck yeah.
I saw a vision that I had no idea I was going to experience. Let's see if I can find it here. And I saw a vision of me speaking in front of a large group of people, about 1 million people. And I have a famous painter in Melbourne, Australia, named Andrew Tischler, that heard me mention this story. And he asked if he could paint the vision that I'd shared with him that night. And this is what he painted. See if I can get it to show up here. This is what he painted.
Oh, that's incredible. I'm so going to reach out to you to get a copy of that. I feel like everybody needs to see that in the show notes.
Is it blurry?
It's a little bit blurry from here, but wow. Okay, so what I'm seeing, folks, for everybody listening, is Dr. Demartini standing on a balcony. There's a big open space below with a fountain in the very center, but it is packed. I mean, it is like wall to wall, end to end, people looking up at him as he gives a speech. It's fantastic. Wow.
And in the background is an iconic building from every major city around the world. When I was 17, I saw a vision of that. And I set out on a quest to overcome my learning problems and speaking problems. And health problems I had at the time. And I wanted to travel the world, step foot on every country on the face of the earth, and share whatever I learned with whoever would listen to me.
Yeah.
And that was 50 plus years ago. I started actually picking up students at age 18, and I've been teaching ever since. And I taught through school and taught my way into business and practice. And then I've spoken now in 192 countries.
I'm sorry, just hearing this, to interject, is so amazing to me, because I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people who have these big visions and dreams and aspirations. They let those little inner voices talk them down. They're always looking, it seems, and I think part of it is societal conditioning, right? But they're looking for reasons why they can't. And I think that's a lot of fear talking, but it's interesting to me that, you're bringing up all of this stuff that the typical person, most of us, I know I have been there before too, would look at, I'd file this in the cons list on that side of the equation. Here's the reasons why I can't do this. And you just looked at all of those and said, nope, I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to make this work on my terms. It's fascinating to me. And it was a yoga class that inspired that?
It was a yoga. Well, the teacher was named Paul C. Bragg. And he was a naturopath, and he spoke on longevity and health issues. I had a health issue at the time. I'd just gotten I was just getting over strychnine cyanide poisoning.
Wow.
So I had a neuromuscular condition on top of my speech problem.
Oh.
But I think because when I was a child, I had a speech impediment. And then I was in school, my teacher, when I tried to go to school, I couldn't read and I couldn't spell and I couldn't pronounce things. And so I had to go to the dunce class. And my first grade teacher told my parents, I said, I'm afraid your son's never going to be able to read. He's never going to be able to write. He's not going to be able to communicate effectively, not probably go very far, not amount to much. But I got out of braces. I also had a deformed arm and leg. And so when I got out of braces at 4, I just wanted to run. And so the teacher said, put him into sports. Maybe he can excel there. So I went off to play baseball and surfing. And I was in Hawaii when this happened. And I'd made my way over to ride giant waves in Hawaii. That's where I was living at the time. From the age 15 to 18, I was living there. And I just wanted to go surf. At the time, I thought I was going to be a surfboard maker and ride waves all my life.
Nice.
But that night, something shifted. And it was the first night in my life that I thought maybe I could overcome my learning problems. Maybe someday I could be intelligent. I never thought I was going to be book intelligent. But with the help of that gentleman's speech that night, a whole new trajectory occurred. And it was a tear-jerking, heart-opening epiphany night. Not for me only, but everybody in that room. A lot of stuff was happening that night. And
that's incredible.
That led me back to fly back to LA, hitchhike back to Texas, where my parents were living, because I was living on my own. And I left home at 13. I was a street kid from 13 to 18. And I went back and I eventually took a GED, high school equivalency test, and friggin' guessed and passed. And then I failed when I went back to school. And my mom saw that I was crying in the living room because I'd failed the test. And I thought maybe this dream of speaking was an illusion. And I kept hearing my first grade teacher say, oh, he'll never read, he'll never write, he'll never communicate, never amount to thing, never go for it. And my mom said, what happened? I said, I failed my test. I got a 27. I needed a 72 to pass. My first college test I ever took, and I failed it. And she said, son, whether you become a great teacher and travel the world like you dream, or whether you return to Hawaii and ride giant waves like you've done, or you return to the streets and panhandle as a bum, which you've also done, I just want to let you know that your father and I are going to love you no matter what. We just love you. We want you to know that. Yes. And when she said that, my hand went into a fist, and I closed my eyes and I looked up in my mind's eye and I saw that vision I showed you. And I said to myself, with my hand in my fist, in a moment where there's no turning back, there's no option. There's a moment of determination. I said, I'm going to master this thing called reading, studying, and learning. I'm going to master this thing called speaking and teaching. And I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to travel whatever distance. I'm going to pay whatever price to give my service of love across the planet. I'm not going to let any human being on the face of the earth stop me, not even myself. And I got up, I hugged my mom, and I went into my room and I got a dictionary out and I started memorizing 30 words a day out of a dictionary. And 2 years later, I have 20,000 words in my head, and I'm now excelling, and I'm now at the top of the class. Wow. So in 2 years, I turned my learning challenges into an opportunity, but I put in the hours. I put in literally 20 hours a day.
Yeah. Wow. That's an incredible, I was like furiously scribbling down notes while you were talking about that. So first of all, I wanted to circle back because I know I chuckled a minute there, but the thought that passed through my head when you said, and I guessed at that and passed, I was thinking, wow, we place so much emphasis on education, but with the tests and the milestones that you have to pass, to me, it doesn't feel like we really take into account all the different kinds of intelligences that people possess. And so that's why I was glad that you actually said, I had this thought in my head that I was never going to be intelligent. But what if it's a different kind of intelligence that you can tap into? There's interpersonal growth skills. There's mathematical. There's spatial. There's so many different intelligences that you can have. Yeah.
I was intelligent on a surfboard.
Yeah. Oh my God. And that's something that I look at folks that do parkour and flips and twists and gymnasts and things like that, and I just get scared and think I could never move my body through space like that. But I could hear somebody play something and be able to sing it very accurately because I've got a musical intelligence too. So I think one of my biggest sadnesses out there in the world is that there are so many people that come up thinking because they can't do a particular test or they can't reach a milestone that everybody thinks that they should be at, that they're not intelligent. And I am very vehemently, passionately against that line of thinking. I think everybody has something special to offer the world. So bravo, yay for you.
Totally agree with what you just said.
Well, and that was the funny thing too. Like we're going to get like super high level here, but talk about the power of love in action, right? And the power of the right idea at the right time. Because I see so many people who get shut down because they're surrounded by people who are either fearful or they don't believe or they're jealous for some reason. They want to kind of squash out the light around them. But I'm firmly in the Marianne Williamson camp of like, if I'm holding a lit candle and I want to light yours, it doesn't make mine any dimmer. And in fact, makes the whole room brighter for us sharing our light with each other. So if you don't have anybody in your corner that can listen to you exactly like Dr. Demartini's parents said when they said, you could panhandle, you could surf, you could do whatever you want, and we're still going to love you, then I think that that's mission number one. Go find those people, seek them out, the ones that are going to be in your corner, no matter what you decide. Because if you've got those people around you that are naysayers, they're not going to help you get to that next level. They're going to actively tear you down. And that doesn't make them bad people. It just means that they're not the right people to support you on this journey.
Well, but the thing is, maybe they are. Maybe that is part of the perfection too. You know, if my teacher said I would never read, I've now read over 3,750 books. She said I would never write. I've written over 100 books. I would never communicate. We reached over 5 billion people in communication with radio, television, newspapers, magazines, movies, you name it. Never go very far. I've traveled over 20 million miles flying, and I sail. I live on a ship, and I sail around the world on the ship nonstop.
Oh my gosh.
And I didn't amount to anything. Well, I'm 50 times over financial independence. So the very thing she said I wouldn't do came the very focused, at least few of the focused things I end up accomplishing. So sometimes the naysayer is initially not understood, but maybe it's a catalyst in a way that you never saw. And I would say that everything is on the way, not in the way. Ask the question, how is whatever's happening to me today, whether supportive or challenging, helping me fulfill my mission on life? Because we maximally grow at the border of support and challenge. So whenever we can see that we're challenged, instead of running from challenge and seeking support, which makes you juvenilely dependent, embrace the challenge because it makes you precociously independent. And you need the both in order to become more of an entrepreneur and be able to do something that's original and make a difference in the world. Fitting in isn't going to do it. So supporting is going to keep you small. It's the challenges that create innovation, creativity, genius, and original thinking, not the supportive parts.
Absolutely. I love that word, precocious. And I feel like that is the perfect word to inspire folks. You know, I've talked before in the show a little bit about negative motivation because I grew up kind of an angry person. And so that was definitely a big motivator for me in the past when somebody was like, well, you can't do that. And I was like, watch me. I'm going to do it anyway. And so I do agree with you that there's a certain power to people telling you, no, you can't do this. And whether or not you choose to believe them or you choose to rebel against them. I love that.
We can be driven by two variables. The fear of loss of that which we seek and the fear of gain of that which we try to avoid can still drive us to do amazing things. So I don't have this idea that I need to get rid of half of life, that, I need to only be with one side, or I need to only have one-sided type of people. I look at how is whatever's happening to me, supportive or challenging, kind or cruel, nice or mean, positive or negative, whatever those illusions are, those are subjective biases anyway. Yes. How is whatever's happening helping me move one step closer to what I'm dreaming about? And I find if I come from that perspective, I can spin whatever happens into light instead of being caught in the paradoxes of the positive and negative charged particle of experience.
Oh, I love that reframe of being able to take whatever comes at you, whether for better or for worse, positive, negative, indifferent, attached, whatever, and use that as fuel and getting you one step closer to whatever you want. It's all in your head, guys. That's what I'm telling you. And I wrote down and circled on the way, not in the way. I think that's fantastic. And I want to put that on a shirt.
We have all these experiences in life. And the only reason we're judging them positively or negatively is because we've inculcated or injected the values of some mother, father, preacher, teacher, convention, tradition, or moray, a moral hypocrisy of one-sidedness. And it's a survival thinking instead of the objective, neutral truth about life. And there's, as John Milton said, you can make a heaven out of a hell or a hell out of a heaven. So every event is neutral until we go in there and spin it with our own subjective bias and our own false positive, false negative, conscious and unconscious splits. Once we see both sides and have mindfulness, we see that no matter what happens, it's on the way. I worked with a gentleman who was the CEO of American Capital Corporation, and we were getting ready to go to lunch one day. And a guy comes into his office right as we're about to leave, and he says, well, we've dropped $400 million in one of our funds today. There's been an exit of fund, people taking money out. And I was sitting there with a knot in my stomach because I was just trying to imagine what that would feel like to have a fund drop $450 million. It seemed like a lot to me. The CEO looked at that, and he didn't even bat an eyelash. He didn't say a thing. He just said, do this, 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 this. All right, ready, John, let's go to dinner, go to lunch. And I'm thinking, how did you know to make the right decision? I asked him. He says, I don't make right decisions. I don't think in terms of right and wrong. I make a decision and then I spin it and we work it towards making sure that it serves. The whole reframe at that. About 37 years ago, he woke me up on that one.
I love that. That reminds me of one quote that I heard. I can't remember where, but I'll find the source for it. It's pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Suffering is something that often we choose. The pain is going to happen, whether you're prepared for it or not. Nobody's saying that anybody deserves the pain, but the suffering, we can choose to make something of it, or we can choose to kind of sit in it and not do anything with it.
If I've jokingly said things for people, I said, if I was to take your hand and grab it and put it on a table and flatten it out and put it on a table and take a hammer and slam your thumb, bam, on your thumb, your first interpretation was, what the hell's wrong with you? You bastard, what did you do that for? And you would probably think that's the most awful thing. But I said, if I associated and stacked up a number of advantages to it, I told you I'm going to give you $1 billion cash, and you're going to have a week with Hugh Jackman if it's a woman, or somebody else if it's a female male or something, or whatever gender you desire. And said, I'm going to give you this unbelievable person to be with. I'm going to give you $1 billion cash, and a surgeon's going to repair your thumb. It'll be perfectly normal in 10 days. But if I gave you that, would you put your thumb on there? And they'd say, slam away, dude.
It's all in that reframe, mate.
Yeah. Once you perceive enough advantages over disadvantages to something you think is painful, it's not painful.
Yes.
It's just
true.
Anaxagoras, 2,500 and something years ago, Anaxagoras said that pain and pleasure are lopsided perceptions. Balance the perception and you transcend both those illusions.
I love that, because I feel like we let that perception of pain, or the perception of the potential for pain, stop us a lot from taking action. I know I've told the story on the show before where the first time I went out to advertise my business, I was going to send direct mail letters. And I managed to convince myself that if I sent letters out to advertise my marketing business, that I was going to directly cause nuclear winter and the end of all life as we know it. And it was all connected step by step. I lived in Silicon Valley at the time, and there's a defense contractor on site. And so I was like, yes, I'm going to piss off the person with access to the red button, and we're all going to die. But then when I gave myself permission to take it to that level without judging it, I was able to kind of break that cycle and understand that, no, the consequences aren't that dire. And worst case scenario, nobody responds. And I spent a whole lot of time sending out letters, and it doesn't, and then we'll just keep moving.
Can I share something that I think might helpful to an entrepreneur?
Absolutely.
The distinction between a fantasy and an objective.
Mm-hmm.
Let me give you an idea. I'll use a metaphor of a relationship to get this point across. if I go up to somebody and I meet somebody and I want to be in a relationship with them, if I have an expectation that they need to be nice, never mean, kind, never cruel, positive, never negative, peaceful, never wrathful, giving, never taking, generous, never stingy, considerate, never inconsiderate. If I have an expectation that is one-sided, I have a fantasy because I'm not going to get that.
Mm-hmm.
If I have an expectation that that individual is a unique individual with a set of values, and anytime I do things that support her values, she'll be nice and kind and generous, etc. And every time I do something that's challenging her values, she'll be mean as a tiger, challenging, critical, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have a realistic objective. If I'm going to be in a relationship, I know that I'm going to get both of that relationship. And I'm going to learn how to love that person for the wholeness of that, not expect them to be one side and try to get rid of half of them.
Yeah.
And if I have an expectation of only one-sidedness, one, they can't live up to it. And then I have an unrealistic expectation, which is going to lead me to be angry and aggressive, want to blame the person and feel betrayed, criticize them and challenge them. I'll feel despaired and depressed. I'll want to exit and escape. I'll feel futile and frustrated. I'll feel grouchy and grieving. I'll hate the person and hurt the person. I'll be irritable and irrational. And I'll be, in a situation of jadedness and jerkiness. If that's I'm playing with the ABC. So if I'm in that mode, I've set myself up because of my false expectation of a one-sided thing, which is a fantasy. It's an unrealistic expectation, fantasy that a human being is going to be that way. But we do that same thing with goals. We expect a goal to be positive, not negative, kind, not cruel, support, not challenge. And that is a fantasy. A true objective is you're going down a path to achieve something. And you're going to have pains and pleasures, positives and negatives, supports and challenges, ups and downs along the path. If you can't embrace both of them and can't be prepared for both of them and mitigate one side and calm down the fantasy of the other side, you're probably going to give up on your objective. And you're going to have intuition whisper to you all of the downsides that you're overlooking to try to, and you'll call it fear and anxiety and sabotage and limiting beliefs. You'll give it all kinds of names, but it's your intuition trying to make you aware of both sides of what you're pursuing to set a true objective, which is neutral and balanced, not a fantasy of one-sided.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I find our expectations are often the root of the worst, most crushing of our disappointments, that we were desperately hoping for something and sometimes not even admitting it to ourselves. But then when it turns out different from what we wanted, it feels like we did something wrong, something that we should be judged for, versus like what you were saying with that executive who lost all that money and made that quick decision, choosing, okay, well, this is the decision that I'm going to make next. I'm going to hope for the best, but whatever happens next will inform the step after that. And then what happens next will inform the step after that.
He knew from experience that whenever the market shares go down, then people who are intelligent and have cash reserves buy it up for its undervalued stock. So he knew that that's temporary, and he knew that that's not something to react to. You know, when your market goes up, you make money in the past. When the market goes down, you make money in the future. So either way, you make money if you're patient and perseverant, and you think in terms of intrinsic value, and you patiently pursue your financial objectives. And so he understood that. But I, at the time, was more naive and imagined, my God, that's a lot of money to drop. And I was trying to picture of me. I didn't have that much money to drop. So I was shocked by it.
That's interesting. I've heard this saying a lot, zig when others zag, but I've found that to be true, that a lot of folks that seem to be stuck in struggle mode, right, and never finding a way to get ahead are often trying to blend into the crowd and do what they see other people doing because that makes sense to them. Of course it makes sense. That's the majority culture narrative, right? But if you dare to stand out, there's that fear of the nail that sticks out is the one that gets the hammer, right? To take it back to the hammer beating.
If you're not being crucified, you're not on purpose.
Yeah.
That's just that.
I love that. I love that. Oh, this is getting me so fired up. I'm having to go through like 2 pages in notes to find what I want to ask you next. Actually, I want to go back because I know that we kind of glossed over the growth from where you started back at that yoga class and all of the challenges that you were facing to where you are now in your career. But tell me a little bit more about what it was like building that up, getting started, writing that first book. You gathered as many followers as you could at 18, and how did you grow it from there?
The first student I ever had was a 375-pound Afro-American woman that wanted me to teach her yoga.
Wow.
because I'd been taking yoga already. And so she saw me in the library and she came in, can you teach me that? She didn't even know what it was. And I looked at her and I thought, there ain't no way. I was the skinniest kid in the school, and she was the biggest woman in the school. And but I took her on. I said, absolutely, I'll do whatever I can do. And she was the most lovely, most inspiring lady, the perfect first student, eager to learn.
Oh,
Then I was
love that.
meditating outside under a tree, well, out in the sun, but near a tree. And this guy came up to me and he was eating some lunch. He said, can you teach me that? And I was doing meditation. I said, I can. That student, May will be 50 years. He's still been with me as a student for 50 years. Still with me. My second student still there.
Wow. Holy cow.
That's the tearjerker. The third one walked into the library when I was studying for a test, and he came in and said, John, can I study with you? Then 17 students came out of a class and came and gathered around the table and said, can we study with you? I said, absolutely. They started asking me questions, and I was tutoring them on what I was learning on math at the time. And it was so inspiring to have somebody want to ask me questions, because I was told that I would never be able to, be intelligent. So that was, by then, I was starting to pick up students there at the first junior college I was going to. When I went on to the University of Houston, I used to do yoga under the trees, and just by myself, just sit there. And people started to think, well, this is odd, because this is back in the early 70s, right? And they didn't see a lot of, yogis sitting out there. And so they used to come up to me and ask me questions. And 100, 125, 150, sometimes 400 people would gather under the trees each day.
Wow.
When it was rain, they would come into the cafeteria. So I'd have a pile of people come into the cafeteria, and I started giving classes. And anything they'd ask questions on, I would research and make sure I was ready, because I just loved learning, because I didn't know I could read. And I finally learned how to read. It was like a dream. So by the time I went on to professional school, I started teaching 7 days a week. I made it all the way through school. I first did love donations, whatever you want to pay, just put it in a bowl kind of thing, like at a church or something. But then all of a sudden I realized nobody loved me. No one was putting anything in there. And so I said, minimum low donation, $5, minimum low donation, $10. Finally, I said, minimum love donation, $20. Each time it went from $5 and $10 and $20, I got my little thing. And finally I said, wait a minute now, I'm working my butt off, and I'm doing these hours of 3-hour teachings every night and studying my butt off in the morning. I deserve better than that. And I finally, out of my altruistic act of giving something for nothing, I said, I deserve more than that. And I put $20 for the class, and $360 was put in the little bowl. And I went, wow. And I cried that night. Because I realized that the world is waiting for you to value yourself. If you're waiting for the world to value, forget it. Just waiting for you to value yourself. So I raised my fees for, over the years, until I was making a little bit more money than that. But I then went on to going into practice, and I was practicing as a doc for a while, and I was teaching every night, literally every night. And I had built my practice that way. And then I started being asked to speak at conferences. And that started first throughout the United States, then Canada, and then over to France and Scotland. And it just kept going. And now I'm just traveling full time and speaking full time.
Oh, man, that sounds incredible. And when you said earlier that you lived on a ship, traveled full time, I was like, I'd be lying if I said that wasn't something that I looked into potentially doing someday.
I'm on a ship right now. I'm sailing right now. I just left Izmir, Turkey, and I'm sailing in. We'll have a whole day of sailing tomorrow, but then I'll be in Istanbul the following morning.
Oh, that's so fantastic. I was talking with a friend the other day about the difference between people that have kind of a nomadic soul versus people who like to settle and make a home and stuff like that. And that's not to say that I don't want a home, but I can't stay in one place too long before I start to get restless and itchy.
Well, when I first left Hawaii, the teacher said, because I walked up to him and I asked him, I don't know how to read. How am I going to be intelligent and be a teacher? That's what I saw in the vision. He said, well, whatever you saw tonight will become reality. And I said, well, I don't know how that's going to happen. I don't know how to read. He said, say to yourself every single day that I'm a genius and I apply my wisdom. So I've never missed a day. And he told me to say it every day until the cells in my body tingled with it until the world did. I've never missed a day of saying that every single day. But I realized that a genius is one who listens to their inner voice and follows their inner vision within and doesn't let the world on the outside distract you from that which is inspiring and intrinsic on the inside. So I came back to Texas and I asked my mom, what exactly is a genius? And she said, well, people like Albert Einstein and Da Vinci. I said, well, get me whatever you can get me on those guys. I want to learn about them. Well, I got and read this book on Einstein, and Einstein said, I'm not a man of my family. I'm not a man of my community. I'm not a man of my city. I'm not a man of my state. I'm not a man of my nation. I'm a citizen of the world, just like Epictetus and Socrates and Thucydides had said. And I thought, wow. And so I wrote down a statement at age 18. The universe is my playground. The world is my home. Every country's a room in the house. Every city is a platform to share my heart and soul. And today I live on a ship that goes around the world called the world. So I'm a citizen of the world.
Oh my gosh.
And the whole world, I see the whole world as a big house. And so I'm never away from the people I love because they're just another room in the house. And so instead of walking room to room, I fly or sail room to room. Instead of speaking, just by voice, I speak on Zoom and Skype and whatever, WhatsApp or whatever, Facebook and FaceTime. So it's just a frame of reference. Give yourself permission to have an astronomical vision so you can have a global effect. That's what I tell people.
Absolutely. I think that's funny because I started my digital nomad journey a couple years ago. And my biggest fear when I hit the road was one, that I wouldn't know what to do, and two, that I would be lonely. And I think the biggest surprise to me was how many people, especially by merit of this globally connected, internet driven world, right, that I had friends literally in every place that I stopped. If I didn't know someone personally, I knew someone who knew someone, and they connected me. And even when I couldn't make a connection and sit down with people that I knew, I was able to sit down in random places with strangers who were locals in the town and start up a conversation that made me feel like I had known them forever. And I think that was the biggest surprise to me, that I have friends and family wherever I go. This is not lonely whatsoever. Yay, life.
Yeah. Well, I like Milton's term on this. When his wife was asked, where does he get his knowledge? The poet. And he said, is it a muse or how does he do it? He says, no. He's inspired. And says, well, isn't it a lonely life? He says, lonely? How could he be lonely? Isn't he just another star in the Milky Way? So I look at it as we're just stars in the Milky Way.
That's beautiful. And I love, just this going back to deciding what to believe about yourself, because we all get these messages of what people think is possible all the time. But just to highlight that thing that you said, that you decided you were going to do what it takes and you weren't going to let anybody stop you, even yourself. I'm going to encourage everybody listening right now, make that your mantra. Don't let you stop you above everybody else. Find reasons that you can do the thing that you want to. And exactly like Dr. Demartini said, give yourself permission to do the big, audacious, the scary dream that you don't even know that's possible. But hey, guess what? Hint, it's never going to be possible as long as you don't believe it's possible. So give yourself permission to believe it's possible. Then you can actually start to figure out how to do it. I love this too. And I think there was something really cool there too that I see. This is where I see a lot of people burn out in the early stages of their business, which is why I wanted to ask about those early growth days. You started asking for the love donations and kind of tentatively putting it out there. But I circled and highlighted that the world waits for you to value yourself, because I've been caught in that trap before too, where I kind of tentatively put something out there. And I had unconsciously said to myself, well, once I see that people really want this thing that I'm building, then I'll put all of my effort into it. And that's not to say that I showed up and half-assed anything, but I didn't want to put myself all the way out there until I got some interest. And then I found that really doesn't serve the mission that I'm on. I've got to put myself all the way out there. And exactly like you said, learn what I can, for better or for worse, pivot and adjust from there, make it better from there. But I love that eventually you were like, yes, look at how much I put into this. I put my heart and soul into this. Look at how much preparation I do. I absolutely deserve something for the value that I'm putting out there into the world. I would like to make $20 per class. Fantastic.
Yep. When I was 27, a gentleman asked me, he came in, well, a financial planner showed up in front of my office. He was looking for clients, and he
Mm-hmm.
asked if he could spend a few minutes with me. And I said, certainly. And he says, do you ever have intention of being financially independent? I said, of course. He said, are you sure? I said, well, as far as I know. He said,
Mm-hmm.
do you mind if I ask you 10 questions to find out if you're serious?
Mm-hmm. Wow.
I thought, what a provocative question.
Very
And
much.
I said, well, certainly, I'd love to have those 10 questions. Okay, so then he asked me 10 questions. Now, these are the 10 questions to decide whether or not you really are serious about being financially independent. If you can't answer them, you're not going to be. That was a
Oh.
real rough thing to face.
Mm-hmm.
So he asked, what are your total assets currently? And I didn't really know. I was
Mm-hmm.
27 years old and I really didn't comprehend really what an asset was. And I really didn't comprehend what mine were. I didn't know where I really was with as far as my financial situation. I didn't have my financial house in order.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, I'm going to have to think it through. He said, well, if you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're going, you don't have a strategy to get there, it's not likely to get there. Imagine getting an Uber and said, come pick me up. Where are you? I don't know. Where are you going?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Can't get you there.
Right.
So I said, I will find it out. We need to know what your assets are. So I estimated it. He made me estimate it to the best of my ability. And at the time, I was at negative assets. I had liabilities. I didn't have assets because I had student loans and I had just gotten a loan to open up my business and I had a car and all this other stuff. So then he asked me, what are your total assets? Then he went to the second question, what are your total liabilities? And I knew those. And I was
Mm-hmm.
very fresh on those. I knew every one of the debts I had, and I added them. I saw those and I went, okay, that's what it is. I said, well, then add them together, subtract your liabilities from your assets. What's your total net worth? And it was negative. At a negative total net worth of 27.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, and I was a little embarrassed, but I realized I was only 27. I just got out of school and I got a loan and I got in debt. I mean, that's part of the way it is. Then he asked me the fourth question. What exactly is the amount of money you intend to receive monthly from your passive investments, monthly or annually? What is the amount you intend to have annually or monthly? That means 1/12 of whatever the total annual is. How much is that? What are you calling? What are you going to define as financial independence that you're going to passively have coming in? And if you don't have a clear idea what it is, you don't know what you're shooting for. And I said, the most I'd ever made is $100,000 a year. And I hadn't gotten married yet. And I thought, well, $100,000 a year in 1982 was like about 600 now. And I thought I could probably survive. And he says, then write that down. So now I got my assets, my liabilities, my net worth, and what I'm intending to say I would like to have passive as financial independent, at least that minimum amount.
Mm-hmm.
He said, okay, great. Now, what is the average interest rate that you, with your knowledge of investing, feel confident, consistently, conservatively, that you can earn on your investments?
Yeah.
And I went, I had no idea. I hadn't done a lot of investing. I just saved some money and then bought a car and saved money and bought a surfboard and, bought books. I invested. I was never having money work for me until this guy woke me up that day. And then I said,
Wow.
I don't know, what's a reasonable amount that you feel with your knowledge I could do with very little knowledge about it? He says 8%. I said 8% then. He said, well, the next question is, what is the average interest rate you'll be up against over the time of your next 50 years of investing? And I said, I have no idea. I don't even know what the interest rate is. He said, well, right now it's high, but it is low at times. And then we went into 20-something years, 25 years of really low. So we totaled it at 3%. And the last 40 years, that was probably been a high end. It had been lower than that.
Yeah.
So we said, all right, 3%. I said, well, now I've got the total assets, the total liabilities. the net worth, what I'm shooting for as the net passive income per year, what is the average interest rate I'm going to earn on my investment knowledge, what's the inflation that up against it. And then he said, so now what is the total amount of net worth you need today to have financial independence today?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay, I calculated. I had a little bit of math. So I said 8% minus 3% is 5%. 5% into 100% is 20. 20 times 100,000 is 2 million. So I need $2 million earning 8% minus 3% to give me an average of $100,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay. And he said, fantastic. You figured that out. Now, what's the shortfall between what you need, which is $2 million, and what you actually have today, which is negative? Well, I need to add another 100,000 to it. So I need $2.1 million, $2,100,000 today to have financial independence. And I said, great. And I'm now having a headache and jaw tightness and an itchy butt and everything else. And a stomach ache, And he says, so now the next question is, what is your strategy to have that today?
Mm-hmm. Wow. Oh, man.
And I sat there and I said, I need to go to the bathroom. And I sat there with a throbbing headache, my jaw in a tight, headache, heart palpitations going. I couldn't see any light at the end of the tunnel. I could not come up with a strategy in order to make $2,100,000 in 24 hours. I just didn't see how I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I came back in and I said, well, let me think about it. I could do 1,050,000 in 2 days. Nope, don't know how to do that. I can make $525,000 at 4 days in a row. No, don't want to do that either. I was averaging $200 a month in savings at the time. And
goodness.
And I thought, well, let's see. I broke it up into 8 days, 16 days, 32 days. I just kept stretching it out. But then he said, well, if you keep stretching it out, you got to now add inflation in there to erode it.
Yeah.
And so I gave myself 15 years all of a sudden to be able to get there. And then I thought, well, the cost of living is going to be double by then. I need $4 million by then. So I said, I need $4 million over the next 15 years set aside to give me the lifestyle that I'm saying I want. And I've got 15 years to do it. I was 27 years old. So that's going to put me at 42. Yeah. And I thought, And then I thought, well, how much is that I need to be saving in a month or investing in a month? So I took $4 million and I divided by 180 months, and it came out $22,000 a month. I need to be averaging with compound interest and savings and investments. And I thought, I'm saving 200. I need to kick that into gear 100 times more than I'm doing now. And I went back and my head was throbbing. I was like, and I'm thinking, there's no way I'm going to give up on the idea of financial independence, but I don't see how I'm going to get this. This is either a delusion of fantasy, and less than 1% make it. Most people don't get there. So I thought, what the hell am I going to do? And then all of a sudden, this door opened up on the 10th question.
Ooh.
On the what's the strategy? And all of a sudden I got an ingenious idea pop in my head. I thought of a forced accelerated savings technique, and then a forced accelerated investment technique, or a forced automated savings technique and a forced automated investment technique, which means that I'm going to automate an accelerated savings and investment procedure. I'm going to start out at $200 a month, which I did. Yeah. And then I made it 300 3 months later. Then I made it 500 3 months later. Then I made it 750 3 months later. Then I made it 1,000 3 months later. And then I made an automatic increase of 10% every quarter. So I made it 1,100. Then I made it 1,210. Then I'm at 1,344. And I followed a Pascal triangle of increasing 10% every quarter. And all of a sudden, I'm now, a year later, or 2 years later, pardon me, I'm now saving 2,000, but one of my loans were completed. So whatever I was paying for the loan now got added to it. And then I started to increase 10%. So now I'm saving $4,000 and 10% more every quarter. So 4,400, 4,080, 840. And all of a sudden, I'm now at 16,000, 8,000 something, 16,000. Every 2 years, it was doubling. And eventually got to $250,000 a month savings.
Wow.
And in 9 years, I was at financial independence and exceeding it. And then I kept going. I kept doing that. And then I set a goal. I said, I want to be financial independence tenfold. Then when I reached tenfold, I want to be financial independence 20-fold. And now it's at the 50-fold mark. So 50 times what was originally thought. But I did it in increments. And that's what is called momentum building. You know, by the inch to cinch, you know, piggy banks become biggie banks. I couldn't see a light at the end of the tunnel until I broke it up and I allowed it to be accelerated. And then I realized I'm going to go below what I need per month, but I'm going to eventually go way above what I need per month if I'm patient and I think long term. And immediate gratification costs you that outcome, but long-term vision pays you that outcome. So my life changed that day when that man walked in my office and asked me those 10 questions. I became financially independent in my 37 years old, and became multiple financial independent from that point up. And I'm going on 69 now.
Oh, I think that's so fantastic. And I love that you brought up that whole time component, the time pressure, because that's such a stopper when you sit and think about if I had to make $2.1 million tomorrow and I can't even fathom, I don't even have a conception of a reality where I could make that work. I feel like that's where so many people short circuit themselves and stop themselves from the possibility. But if they follow that path like you did, where it's like, okay, well, if I didn't have to make it in the next 24 hours, if I had 4 days to do it, if I had 4 months to do it, if I had 4 years to do it, what would it look like? And you start compounding those efforts over time and watching them naturally grow. It's anything that you want is totally achievable. Okay, maybe except flying on your own without machinery, but we still haven't figured out things in the brain yet. So maybe the ability to fly is in there somewhere. I don't know.
But you can do that. You can do that as long as you use gravity on your favor and jump off a mountain. You can fly for quite a while on the way down.
That's true. True. I have gone parasailing. I can confirm this is accurate. But I love that the question was, how do I do this? Not can I do this? And I think that's an important distinction for people to pay attention to. Yeah. If you ask, can I do this? The answer is really yes or no. If you ask yourself how I can do this, that starts to get the gears turning and you start coming up with those creative solutions that are actually going to bring that to reality.
Most entrepreneurs ask the question, how can I afford to do this? I stopped doing that. I stopped doing that by the time I was 30. And I started asking, how can I get handsomely and beautifully paid to do the next step of growth of business? And I changed everything. So instead of saying, how can I afford it? People go out there and borrow money to do advancements of it. I never wanted to borrow money. What I wanted to do is I wanted to go to my customers and prepay and let them, and then I have no risk. And I've got the pressure to satisfy the customer. So I would pre-sell things in advance to get capital. And then I didn't borrow with debt. I guaranteed sales. It was way smarter. So I basically asked, how do I get handsomely paid to do whatever I love? There's 7 questions that blow people's minds if they take it. So if you're an entrepreneur listening out there, get these 7 questions. What is it I would absolutely love to do in life? How can I get handsomely and beautifully paid to do that? What are the 7 highest priority actions I can do today that will move me in the direction of fulfilling that?
Love it.
What obstacles might I run into and how do I solve them in advance? What worked and what didn't work today? And how do I do it more effectively and efficiently tomorrow? And no matter what happened, how did it help me get one step closer?
I feel like you've given us such a great gift with that. And that is like the perfect way to wrap up this episode. I could seriously talk to you for the next 5 hours, but I respect you more than that. And I know it's late for you. So tell us more about where we can learn about you and your mission, get your books, follow along with your speech. Yes, everything. Tell us more.
Well, you can just go to drdemartini.com and that'll probably open the doorway to an educational experience that you probably don't even have the time for because there's so much on my website to educate. It's just unbelievable. And there's tons of books. I've just came out with a new one a few days ago called The Resilient Mind, and I had another one coming out called The Productivity Factor. We got about 43 books out there. And so I'm constantly writing books, constantly doing presentations. If you just go look up drdemartini.com, or Dr. Demartini show or the Dr. Demartini YouTube or whatever, you will be more than you're going to want to. You're going to go, okay, enough for this guy.
I hope not. They need everything that you have to offer. I have loved every minute of this conversation. If you want a part 2, we're definitely on for a part 2 as far as I'm concerned. We could do a part 10
Absolutely.
As far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for being on the show. What an amazing way to start my day. And I hope you have a great night.
Thank you.
That's all for now. If you want to keep that kick-ass energy high, please take a minute to share this episode with someone that might need a high-octane dose of "you can do it." Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the Permission to Kick-Ass podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you stream your podcasts. I'm your host, Angie Coley, and I'm here rooting for you. Thanks for listening, and let's go kick some ass.